Hi, everybody. I'm Richard Sher. And once again, it's time to boom, square off. And boy, what a news week this has been. Let's meet this week's panel. Our resident spiritual leader, Pastor Shannon Wright, conservative talk show host and podcaster, the famous Dan Joseph. Good to have you back. And two of our outstanding attorneys, Chris Kennedy and Barry Gogel. Well, the catastrophic Los Angeles wildfires have captured the attention and sympathy of the nation. The images on television have been so tragic. As of Friday, the death toll was at 10 and is sure to climb. 180,000 people under evacuation orders and a staggering 10,000 homes and other structures, total losses to the various wind-blown destructive infernos. And early today, we got word that a homeless man was busted on suspicion of arson close to where one of the wildfires was ravaging Los Angeles. Brave locals tackled the guy, and he was said to be using a flamethrower. Anyway, let's hear from Dan Joseph to kick us off.
Yeah, well, I think that the destruction that has been brought about because of these fires is unlike anything I've ever seen before. It may be in terms of destruction, in terms of property damage, it may be the worst that the country has ever seen. As someone who lived in LA previously, I'm very saddened. My friends have all been evacuated. People's pets have been lost. It's just horrible. And I think the leadership that was shown during this particular crisis has been subpar at just about every level. You had Karen Bass, who was out of the country at a wedding in Ghana while this was happening. She was warned about this. We also now know that there was $20 million rather cut from the fire department previously before this happened, even though again there were warnings that this was going to happen. And then you have Gavin Newsom, he's on the ground and they can't really answer any questions. And to a certain extent, I understand that. There's a lot of uncertainty here, but at the same time, there's a real absence of leadership. And I will say this too. You have President-elect Donald Trump right now, rightly saying, there are all these things that California has done in the past that have helped to cause this. And at the same time, he's showing absolutely no leadership whatsoever. As
All right, Dan.
president-elect, he should be leading, not complaining.
Shannon, let's hear from you.
I have family out in that area down in Orange County, and California is a beautiful state with so many different assets and things to see. And the fact that they're going through this it's just devastating, especially so close to after the holidays. But the failure of leadership to be able to address the deficits is really scary. When you think about it, nobody can read the future. However, council members and folks in LA have been making note for years. There have been reports saying that there were deficits in their public safety. So if you know that and divert funds from that, in my mind, I know our legal scholars will tell us the answer, but in my mind, you're culpable and responsible.
All right, Chris, before we get to Chris and Barry, let me just say this. At least 5 churches, a synagogue, 7 schools, 2 libraries, boutiques, bars, restaurants, banks, and grocery stores, all destroyed. At least 20 people. Now this other guy, well, he wasn't looting, he was setting fires. 20 people arrested for looting. Barry, jump in.
It's so ironic to hear those people who yell about tax cuts and yell about big government come in and say, oh, but the government wasn't big enough. I mean, to what end here? People are suffering. People are hurting. I should be in LA right now. It's awful. It's horrible. But to turn around and turn this into a political complaint and use it for political opportunism, quite frankly, is making me sick.
Chris.
Yeah, Richard, infrastructure neglect meets climate change. And this is really the sum total of what's been going on. It's been happening for a long time, and it's not just in California, it's throughout the country. There's a lot of examples of infrastructure money from the infrastructure bill not being used or not getting out to solve problems around the country. But I do think that it's not necessary and it's bad form to politicize these natural disasters. It was unfair when Trump was criticized for the Puerto Rico event and throwing the paper towels. It was unfair for him to criticize Biden for what happened in North Carolina and making up stories that weren't true. And it's unfortunate now to see what's going on here. And I think they're just simply targeting Gavin Newsom because he's probably one of the leading candidates to be the next voice for the Democratic Party. And Trump is already working to help his vice president run for president in 4 years. So if we could just step back from these natural disasters politicizing, I think it would be best for everyone.
Well, there hasn't been a situation like this ever. The largest fires in the history of Los Angeles. President-elect Trump, as you mentioned, reopening a long-standing feud with California's governor, Gavin Newsom. Quote, "The gross incompetence and mismanagement of the Biden-Newsom duo is what is happening in Los Angeles right now." Of course, that's generally the rhetoric from President-elect Trump, Dan.
It's frustrating. As president-elect, I would not be attacking my political opponents right now. I would be out there trying to help as much as I can, showing you're a leader, showing that you're someone who empathizes and can sympathize with the people who have lost absolutely everything in this particular situation. But I don't think it's unfair while if there are errors, if there are problems that have been caused by policies and the policies of Gavin Newsom, as well as former governors and former political officials, I don't think it's unfair to point those out so that they don't repeat those same things in the future. And I do think they need to be a really big spotlight needs to be put on environmental legislation in the state of California, because I think in a sense it's wreaking havoc on the people in that state and causing a lot of them to leave.
I think it's perfectly fine to point out mistakes as long as you're accurately pointing them out. And Trump's comments about Newsom in terms of water supply and water access were not true. He's talking off the top of his head, as he often does. So if you're going to make criticisms, I think people on both sides need to check their facts very carefully before they hurl allegations, and maybe step back a little bit and let the emergency get solved and deal with policy issues maybe next month versus 2 days later.
Why is it
One thing we know?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. And the one thing we know about this President Trump is that he accuses others of the things that he's failed to do. So this is his playbook, and it's sad. It's sad that this is the way we're starting a new administration, just like the old one. We're
going to take a break, and we're going to come back, and we're going to talk about Monday, January 20th. This is going to be a heck of a day in Washington and across the country. Right now, ladies and gentlemen, my pleasure to introduce the Emmy Award-winning, Oscar-winning voice of Squirrel. Please pay attention, support our sponsors. Howard Mallison, take it away.
Thank you, Richard. First of all, we would like to welcome our newest sponsor to Square Off, Dr. Kelly Gogel. She's a board-certified podiatrist and heel specialist, and both Richard and I are her very satisfied clients. Dr. Gogel knows that the appearance of your feet matter just as much as correcting any problems. And if you're experiencing toenail fungus, which is an embarrassing thing, it's embarrassing to wear sandals or open-toed shoes, and you've tried all these over-the-counter treatments that don't work, laser treatment done by Dr. Kelly Gogel is the easy way to do it. It goes right to the cause of the fungus and may be right for you.
Yes.
So give Dr. Gogel a call at 410-753-4422 to set up an appointment. It really works. And auto accidents are on the rise. If your car has been in an accident, the insurance companies cannot tell you where to take your car. That's why more and more people are trusting their auto repairs and auto maintenance to leading edge auto body and mechanical repair. They work on all makes and models, and they offer free pickup and delivery anywhere in the Baltimore area. Give them a call at 410-433-6433 or visit them at 5807 Falls Road in the heart of Mount Washington. They make your car look and run like new again. Back to you, Richard.
They are great at leading edge. Annabelle and I take our cars there all the time. Guarantee your car's going to look brand new. Terrific staff of guys and girls, or guys and women. All right, so here we go. A week from Monday, January 20th, Donald Trump takes the presidential oath for the second time. He'll become the 47th president of the United States, but not before the United States Supreme Court, in a shocking 5-4 vote, rejected Trump's bid to block his hush money sentencing. The sentence, an unconditional discharge for his 34 felony counts, released with no restrictions. And President-elect Trump makes history as the first convicted felon to become president of the United States. Shannon, you're a supporter. What do you think?
Wow. Okay. How do I say this politically correct?
Say it. Say it.
So here's what has to happen here. We talk about criminal justice and criminal justice reform, and there's usually one party that is very specific on that. So it seems to me that one side of the argument is, if President-elect Trump is a convicted felon and he pays whatever cost or price he has to pay, then we maybe need to turn the other cheek and look the other way on that. And I say that because when we have folks that go to prison and they come out, everybody says, if you've done your time, it's time for you to re-enter society and become a productive member of society. So you can't have it both ways. Now, on the other side of that coin is the United States is viewed as a world leader. We are a world leader. And it seems to me that we need to make sure we hold all of our elected leaders to a higher standard. But I can tell you, living in Baltimore in 2020, in the mayoral race, 52% of the candidates running had a felony record. 52% of the folks running for mayor. So I think
that doesn't include Shannon Wright.
It absolutely does not.
Richard?
Go ahead, Chris. I want to hear your opinion about
Yeah,
that.
so unconditional discharge, no punishment, no probation, no reporting to a probation officer, nothing, was brilliant by this judge, because it's going to make it a lot harder to reverse this on appeal at the New York State Supreme Court, or even at the federal level with the Supreme Court, because it's no harm, no foul. And yet Trump still can't vote in Florida now. And I'm sure Las Vegas will set the over under at 60 days for how long it'll take Ron DeSantis to somehow change the law to let him to vote. But what's at least encouraging here is that John Roberts has been working on a moderate wing of the court with Coney Barrett and Kavanaugh. He's failed with Kavanaugh, but he's making headway with Coney Barrett as swing votes so that it doesn't become a hard 6-3 majority going forward. So I'm somewhat encouraged by Coney Barrett, who also gave a concurring opinion in the immunity case that showed that they went too far. Going forward, to not be, along with the House and Senate, a wholly owned subsidiary of Donald J. Trump.
Dan, your mouth was open. I know you want to say something.
No, I mean, I just wanted to say that I think that Trump, I wish that the other cases had been brought first. I wish that Merrick Garland had brought the documents case first and the cases regarding January 6th before, because I thought that this was a very weak case. It was almost entirely bogus in my view and should have never been brought in the first place. It certainly shouldn't have been a felony. And I usually don't feel bad for Donald Trump, but in this particular case, I feel like he was railroaded, and I'm glad that the judge saw it fit not to give him any any punishment. I think Chris is right that it's going to be harder now for this to be overturned on appeal. I think it would have been overturned on appeal if this hadn't happened. But at the same time, yeah, I think Donald Trump deserved better when it came to this case in the first place.
There were 12 citizens who were not spin artists who heard all the evidence and convicted them. And the sad
say he
part
wasn't
again, and I hate
guilty
to
of
use
what-
the word sad over and over
Oh,
and over
wait, I
again.
didn't say he wasn't guilty of what they accused him of doing. I said the
Okay.
case shouldn't have been brought in the first place.
Okay. Well, what is the standard for bringing a case? Can you get a conviction? And they got a conviction. They got 34 convictions. But the poignancy of today is in its juxtaposition from yesterday, from the Carter funeral, and the comments, especially that of Jason Carter, about the love story that was Jimmy Carter. It just stands to me of a reminder that you can't be great if you're not good. And Jimmy Carter exemplified goodness. He was considered a weak president, sadly, because of it. But his post-presidency and his legacy, I think, is a stark contrast to what we're seeing now.
Speaking of stark contrasts, the scene in Washington on Inauguration Day is sure to be so much different than January 6th of 2021, when thousands of Trump supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol to block the certification of President-elect Joe Biden's 2020 election victory. Who wants to speak? What do you think it's going to be like a week from Monday?
Give credit to the Democrats here. The Democrats have used this transition to show how awful what the Republicans actually did was. And that's a lesson that everybody should take to heart, everybody in American politics, that there's a right way and a wrong way to do this. And the Republicans did it completely the wrong way in 2020. And now the Democrats have shown an example for everyone.
Barry, I see you nodding.
Well, of course, how can I disagree with that? But unfortunately, the people who did it the wrong way are getting rewarded, and the person who did it the wrong way has been rewarded, and some of the people may be pardoned. And I think that would be just a continuation, Dan, of the wrong way.
Yeah, no, I think some of these pardons that Donald Trump is proposing, especially if it's violent people, especially if they're people who attacked police officers, that's absolutely inappropriate. They need to be punished. They need to be made an example of. But the most important thing, in my opinion, is the peaceful transition of power. And I credit Joe Biden and Kamala Harris for doing that successfully and setting an example.
Couldn't agree more.
Richard,
Go ahead, Chris.
you asked about inaugural day. There's actually a lot more action happening before inaugural day. Next week, the two hearings for Hegseth as defense secretary and Gabbard as DNI are getting underway in the Senate before the inauguration. And I think they're both going to have a difficult time getting through, because it's only going to take one or two Republicans to block that. And interestingly, it's actually been a very long time since a cabinet secretary has been voted down. I think it was John Tower was the last time. But I think those two are going to have a hard time. I think Kash Patel is going to have a very hard time at FBI. And I also think RFK Jr. Is going to have some real challenges with HHS. So there will be some fireworks next week before Trump takes the oath of office.
Barry, you think that they'll be turned down? Some of those nominees won't be confirmed?
Nothing would surprise me. The climate is too unpredictable right now, and so I wouldn't be surprised if they got affirmed because Republicans are in tow. I wouldn't be surprised, but I'd be gladdened if one or two Republicans, found their heart and realized that we need to get the best and brightest, not necessarily the Donald Trump sycophants, to be in the cabinet.
A lot of people were very surprised, even shocked by the Supreme Court's vote against Trump's appeal. What were you surprised? Were any of you not surprised? Dan? Chris, who
I,
was not surprised at that?
I was a little surprised,
I was
but I was
surprised.
encouraged when I saw Coney Barrett do that concurring opinion in the immunity case. I really did believe that Roberts, who truly has been working very hard behind the scenes, reportedly, on her and Kavanaugh to become moderate justices, has made some headway to possibly not turn this into a rubber stamp for Trump. But let me just add one other thing while we're talking
Go
about
ahead,
the
please.
future. The Democrats had a 1940s Maginot Line mentality for approaching this past election. And I think the real question is not only who's going to emerge organically as the new leader of the Democratic Party, but what will be the new battlefield that they look forward to. I saw an interesting stat. People who got their news from the legacy media had Harris winning the election by 6%. But people who got their news from other sources, like podcasts and YouTube, had Harris losing by 9%. So it will be a real challenge for Democrats going forward to step back from the traditional legacy media and reach out to the Trump voters with these other sources and try to get through to them and have an effective message that we care about you and the economy and your jobs and affording things, and have the suitable person to do that. Those are some real big challenges that Democrats face going forward.
One major issue, migrant deportation. And to what extent will migrant-heavy cities cooperate with federal immigration authorities? President-elect Trump has threatened to cut federal funding to states and cities that do not assist in his deportation plans. How does that strike you, Barry or Sharon?
Anytime I hear the words mass deportation, I shudder.
Why is that?
Because I've learned from history that that's a difficult, that phraseology is doesn't sit well with me. Can I just say?
I don't think that President Trump and his administration are going to go through with much of the mass deportation plan. I think that they will make it seem like they're deporting all these criminals and all the murderers and mental patients that came into the country. But when it comes down to it, when it comes down to deporting, innocent people who have jobs in this country, people who've been in this country for a long, long time, they're not going to do that. They don't want the pictures coming out of kids being ripped out of their homes and out of their parents' arms by ICE agents. And yeah, I mean, you can do things to improve immigration. You can do things to limit asylum seekers in this country. But at the same time, I don't think the American people are going to stand for chaos when it comes to deporting people who have done nothing wrong except be in the country for 20 years.
Well,
The
before we get
rhetoric is as bad as the actions. Saying Haitians are eating pets is as bad, if not worse, than actually executing. You can't divorce the man from his words. People say, take him seriously, but not literally. How can we have a president like that?
Well, we do.
Yeah.
And
Richard,
That's a scary thought.
Go ahead,
And
Shannon.
the reality is that a whole bunch of folks voted for him, popular and electoral. So I think what we all have to do is put our best prayer hats on and pray for the leadership, whether you like him or not, because regardless, he is the president-elect. And next week will be the president again. So if we all want to move forward and we all want to talk about the new this party, the new that party, that's all well and good. But a majority of the folks spoke and they wanted this.
Did they want this though?
Some of you would
This, or
argue.
do they want
interesting.
inflation to go away?
What
It'll
Dan?
be interesting. It'll be interesting if they really try to go forward with deporting 11 million people. He doesn't have the staff to do that. He'd have to use active military and the National Guard to do that. And those will be horrible scenes. But this is the same guy who wouldn't rule out using troops to take back the Panama Canal or using troops to take over Greenland. His actions will be very closely watched going forward. And I'm very worried about the preservation of democracy and portions of the First Amendment. I'm very worried that an autocracy is in the works, like we've seen with Orban in Hungary. and also Erdogan in Turkey. There's a very real threat to that form of mild autocracy happening beginning next week.
Are we going to take a break? I'm going to come back, talk a little bit about the state of Maryland's $3 billion deficit. What's going to happen down in Annapolis? First, we'll hear from Howard. Go ahead.
Thank you, Rich. You know, I'm sure you've seen some of the Barry Glazer TV commercials. They're different. They get your attention. They also get results. That's why Barry Glazer and his team, including an in-house doctor and nurse, make no apologies for getting every penny they can from the insurance companies. So when it comes to personal injury or medical malpractice, there's only one choice, Barry Glazer at 410-547-8568. You know, there's a lot of diners in Baltimore, and the most famous of them all are the Double T diners, TT, totally terrific. You're sure to find the best breakfast, lunch, or dinner from the Double T's enormous menu selections. There's Double T locations on Route 40 West, Perry Hall, White Marsh, Bel Air, Laurel, Annapolis, Pasadena, and the EC Diner in Ellicott City. And right by the docks in Middle River for their Monday night lobster special. They're all in the Double T family. Now back to you, Richard.
Okay, Howie, thanks. The 90-day 2025 session of the Maryland General Assembly is off and rolling with a nearly $3 billion state budget deficit threatening hard-won investments in education, childcare, transportation, among other initiatives. Governor Westmore says the state is poised, his words, to make tough budget choices, but nothing has yet been determined about the mix of spending cuts and tax hikes needed to cover the spread. But I can tell you, Chris, most Maryland citizens, taxpayers, are not up for this. They're not up for more taxes.
That's true. 3/4 of Marylanders are opposed to an increase in tax, and trying to use a synonym like a surcharge is not going to fool anybody. He's already said he's going to solve the $3 billion deficit problem by cutting spending by $2 billion, which leaves $1 billion in tax increases, which he hasn't announced, but he has to announce that next week when his budget is due. And it'll be interesting. And I'm very concerned that there will be existing taxes that are increased and new taxes that will be implemented.
Fair.
Yeah, they have tough choices to make. I'm glad I'm not in their shoes. I'm glad I'm not the one making these decisions. I think there are places that cuts are obvious and can be made. I think I stand in the middle when we say we need to be fiscally sound and socially responsible. And we have a lot of administration. You can look at people look at public education. We have a lot of administration that outweighs performance, and they got to be smart about it.
Dan, what do you think about those guys and gals down in Annapolis?
Yeah, I think that the blueprint for Maryland's future was not responsible in a lot of ways. We knew, and they said, the Democrats said they were not interested in raising taxes when they passed this. You should have known from the very beginning that they would eventually find a way to raise people's taxes. The blueprint has, I think, caused most of this chaos in the budget. And, I don't know what they do at this point. I think that there are going to have to be some tax hikes. I think there are going to be some serious spending cuts that need to happen. But I think the whole thing is just a shame.
Shannon, what do you think?
I think we are seeing the worst case scenario of irresponsible spending and legislation. First of all, if you want to improve education, this massive budget that so many municipalities said they could not afford was not the way to do it. To cram that down folks' throat without a mechanism to be able to pay for it was irresponsible to begin with. That's number one. Number two, at one point we had a surplus. Now we're going into a deficit. We have to look at spending. We have to look at eliminating waste in government, get back to government efficiency. I'm like tongue-tied over this. This is so bad. We're looking at spending. Let's just look at education. We're looking at spending so much money with this blueprint but yet we are having school districts that are still poor performing as they are. Why not root out some of the spending, some of the issues first before trying to find money to put after bad money? Let's get the house in order first.
Problem
Hey,
is,
you know, Richard,
Go ahead.
Richard, there's a
Allocating money.
$63 billion budget. I'm sure if you're going to find 2 billion in cuts, you could find another billion to cut as well. And I think he might actually just do that. I've never seen a governor more focused on his image than this guy who loves cameras and microphones, let's face it. And he knows that raising taxes is not going to help his political future, and he's very focused on his political future.
Do you think that the governor's a media hound, that he loves the cameras?
I absolutely do. And I think, I mean, let's be honest. When's the last time you saw, the start of a season for the Ravens or the Terps or the Commanders without him on the sideline giving it, an interview? The guy loves cameras and microphones, and he's always there when there's a press conference, even when some other department is talking. But it's pretty obvious.
That means he's a politician.
We are a little short on time. I do want to say, in fairness, that this program is being recorded. We record it on Fridays. So this is being recorded on the Friday before the Saturday, before the Ravens knock off you know who. What do you think about what's going to happen tomorrow night or Saturday night?
I'm excited. I want to see I want to see the Ravens have a good start to this playoffs. I hope that this is the year that they can make it all the way. And it's just such a pleasure to watch Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry lead this team to what I think is going to be a great outcome.
Three words. Run the ball.
Run the ball.
Yeah, Richard, we were talking before it started. Derrick Henry's been averaging 6 yards a carry the whole season. That's unheard of in the NFL.
Yeah.
And if he can duplicate that Saturday night, it's going to be a good night for the Ravens.
Shannon, I know you are an unbelievably diehard Ravens fan. What do you think about the game?
We can go with that. So I'm hoping that they win. I am looking forward to actually watching the game from the comfort of my very comfortable couch and big screen TV, where it'll be nice and warm and toasty. And my girlfriend will be out in the stadium freezing their tushes off. But I will be watching the game. I do hope that the Ravens win. I will say, though, I'm a New Yorker. I'm born in New York. So I
like her anyway.
Well, thank you for that. I'm sad that my Giants are not here at this point in the season. I'm very sad for that. But when in Rome, and I do hope that being the case, that the Ravens win. And really just kind of spank their little tushies and send them back on to where they go.
Now you got tushes on your mind, so we have to say goodbye. I want to really wish the Ravens a great, great game. And that when we come back next week at this time at squareoff.net, we'll be heading into even a championship game. All right. Thank you very much, Dan, Chris, Barry, and Pastor Wright. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Richard Sher. Thanks for joining us. Please support our sponsors, and we'll see you next time, next week at 7:30 or whatever time. Why did I say 7:30? I don't know what I'm saying here. I'm so excited about the game. See you next time. And once again, we square off. Boom. Bye.